For 7 months, Jennifer Faith convinced an old boyfriend that her husband was a monster. She told him Jamie Faith was abusing her. She created fake email accounts to impersonate Jamie and another person who could seemingly confirm her story. She sent photographs of evidence of injuries, photographs investigators would later determine came from an old car accident or had been pulled from the internet. None of it was real. But the man receiving those messages believed her. And on October 9, 2020, he drove nearly 1,000 miles from Tennessee to Dallas, approached Jamie while he was walking his dog with Jennifer, and shot him 7 times. Then, Jennifer told police they'd been attacked by a stranger. For months, she played the grieving widow. She appeared on television, asking the public to help find the killer's truck. She collected money donated to support her family. And all the while, investigators say she was still communicating with the man who had killed her husband. I'm Aaron, and this is the murder of Jamie Faith, a case about deception, manipulation, and the man who admitted pulling the trigger but would later tell a jury that when he did it, he genuinely believed he was saving someone's life. Before we begin, this case involves gun violence and allegations of sexual assault that were later raised as part of the defense. We'll distinguish carefully between what was alleged and what was proven, and what the courts ultimately decided. So let's go back to Dallas, Texas in October of 2020. James Faith, known to nearly everyone as Jamie, worked as an information technology director for American Airlines. Friends who spoke to reporters, including a close friend named Chad Van Ness, remembered him as wholesome, quirky, and a little nerdy. By 2020, Jamie was 49 years old, married to a woman named Jennifer, and living with her in the North Oak Cliff neighborhood of Dallas, an area also reported to in local reporting as South Winnetka Heights. According to one feature account, the family had relocated to Dallas from Arizona in 2017, following a career promotion for Jamie. Jennifer had a daughter, Amber, whom reporting identifies as Jamie's stepdaughter or adopted daughter. Different accounts give different dates for when Jamie and Jennifer met and married. One places their wedding in Las Vegas in 2012, another implies a marriage closer to 2005, and they were married in building a life together in Dallas on the night of October 8, 2020, when one report describes them as marking a wedding anniversary. Whatever the exact date of their marriage, that night was the last one Jamie Faith would spend alive. Because 200 miles away, in Cumberland Furnace, Tennessee, a man named Darren Lopez was already on the road. Lopez was a retired U.S. Army veteran, identified in reporting as a former Special Forces medic. He and Jennifer Faith had dated in high school and were later described in the coverage of the case as having rekindled an emotional affair. The two had no contact for years until in March of 2020 they reconnected on LinkedIn. What followed, according to Jennifer Faith's own later admissions in federal court, was not a rekindled romance built on honesty. It was a manufactured emergency. Within a few weeks of reconnecting, Jennifer began telling Lopez that her husband had discovered their relationship and had started abusing her. On April 9, 2020, she created a fake Gmail account impersonating Jamie Faith. A little over a month later, on May 13th, she created a second fake account, this one impersonating a friend, an independent-seeming voice to back up what she was telling Lopez in her own messages. Investigators would later determine that the injury photographs she sent Lopez as proof of the abuse were not what they appeared to be. Some, according to multiple accounts, were pictures from a car accident Jennifer had been in back in 2012. Others were simply stock photographs pulled from the internet. For roughly 7 months, from April through October of 2020, Jennifer Faith and Darren Lopez maintained an extremely extensive, near constant pattern of texts, calls, and emails. That sustained communication was the medium through which Jennifer spent months convincing a man who once knew her in high school that her husband was a danger to her life. She did more than write emails. Lopez later told investigators that Jennifer had said she tried to report the abuse to authorities and to Jamie's employer and had always been turned away, even threatening that she'd be blamed if she went public. It's part of the story Lopez says convinced him that violence was the only remaining option, not an established fact. By early October, that story had built to a breaking point. On October 8, 2020, Darren Lopez got in his truck in Tennessee and started driving towards Dallas. He was carrying a .45 caliber handgun. The next morning, October 9, 2020, around 7 to 7:30 a.m., Jamie and Jennifer Faith were walking their dog near their home when a gunman approached and shot Jamie 7 times. The gunman bound Jennifer Faith's wrists with duct tape and removed or attempted to remove Jamie's wedding ring. A neighbor, Emery Wilson, told reporters she saw a gunman holding a weapon and fled into her own house. Whoever staged the scene wanted it to look like exactly what it appeared to be at first, a robbery that had gone catastrophically wrong, and in her initial account to police, Jennifer Faith described exactly that. A man in a black pickup truck approaching them, shooting her husband and trying to restrain her. The vehicle the gunman drove away in was distinctive. A black Nissan Titan pickup truck with a white T decal on it, caught on a neighborhood doorbell and home security camera. That decal would end up being one of the most important physical details in the entire case. In the immediate aftermath, the Faith's family's community rallied around them. A neighbor, Jennifer Svellen, set up a GoFundMe campaign the very next day, October 10th, 2020, to help support the family. At the time, there was no reason for anyone to suspect the widow at the center of that fundraiser. Investigators, meanwhile, were working the case as a robbery homicide. They circulated images of that black Nissan Titan and asked the public for tips. And in December of 2020, Jennifer Faith herself appeared on local news, appealing publicly for information about the truck. The same truck investigators would later determine belonged to the man she was privately corresponding with. She was publicly asking for help finding the same truck investigators would later connect to Darren Lopez. She wasn't only appearing on camera. On November 11, 2020, a month after her husband's death, Jennifer Faith filed a life insurance claim for approximately $629,000. For 3 months, the case sat as an unsolved robbery homicide with one strong lead: a black pickup with a white T decal. However, what broke the case open wasn't a witness coming forward or a confession. It was something Jennifer Faith herself had tried and failed to erase. Investigators recovered deleted text messages. Deleted, but not gone. Retired Texas Ranger Jim Holland, later interviewed about the case, described these recovered texts as referencing Jennifer's relationship with a man named Darren Lopez. That recovery is the pivot point that turned the case from a stranger robbery investigation into an investigation of the victim's own wife. From there, the digital trail widened fast. Investigators pulled cell site and GPS data along with debit card records and traced the route: Tennessee to Dallas and back to Tennessee, matching the window around the murder. They found a gap in communication between Jennifer Faith and Lopez the afternoon before the killing, followed by contact resuming roughly 9 hours after. A silence, and then a resumption that lined exactly with the hours a trip like that would take. In another exchange investigators would later use as evidence at trial, Jennifer told Lopez to get the white sticker off the truck, and he replied that it was done. The same decal caught on camera at the scene of the murder. That same week, the investigation reached both of them at once. Jennifer Faith was interviewed by law enforcement over January 10th and 11th, 2021. According to a charging document, around that same time, she had texted Lopez to coordinate their account of events before speaking with investigators. On January 11, 2021, Darren Lopez was arrested during a traffic stop near Dixon, close to Cumberland Furnace, Tennessee. A search of his property turned up the truck with the decal and the .45 caliber handgun. Ballistic testing reportedly confirmed it as the murder weapon, and it reportedly carried trace blood evidence as well. 11 days after that arrest, Lopez was also formally charged in a federal crime complaint with transporting a firearm across state lines with intent to commit a felony, a separate federal offense distinct from the state murder charge that would eventually be filed against him in Texas. Jennifer Faith wasn't arrested yet. That came about 6 weeks later, on February 24th, 2021. She was arrested at her own home on a federal charge of obstruction of justice, destroying evidence with intent to interfere with a federal investigation. 2 days later, she appeared before a U.S. magistrate judge. That obstruction charge, though, would turn out to be only the beginning of what prosecutors believed Jennifer Faith had done. From this point forward, the case splits into two separate legal tracks: a federal prosecution against Jennifer Faith built on the murder for hire statute, and running in parallel over the following 2 years, a state prosecution against Darren Lopez for the murder itself, tried in Dallas County. Different evidence, different courts, and in the end, two very different outcomes. One resolved by a guilty plea, the other decided by a jury. On September 29, 2021, federal prosecutors filed a superseding indictment, an updated set of charges replacing the earlier one, charging Jennifer Faith under a federal statute covering the use of interstate commerce in the commission of murder for hire. Under that law, a conviction can carry decades in federal prison, up to life, or at the time this indictment was filed, potentially the death penalty. Announcing the charges, then acting U.S. Attorney Prerak Shah described the scheme as depraved and calculated. A month later, Darren Lopez sat down with federal prosecutors for roughly 2 hours of interview and cooperated, describing the plot in detail, the staged robbery, and a code word the two of them had used in their communications: 575, a reference to his former U.S. Army Special Forces team number. His cooperation is cited as a contributing factor in what came next. On February 7, 2022, Jennifer Faith pleaded guilty to the murder for hire charge. As part of the plea agreement, the separate obstruction charge was dropped, and prosecutors agreed to recommend a life sentence rather than pursue the death penalty, though the final sentence was left to the judge's discretion. In a sentencing memorandum, prosecutors argued for that life sentence, describing her conduct in one headline as duplicity, greed, and zero remorse. On June 21, 2022, Jennifer Faith was sentenced in federal court in the Northern District of Texas. U.S. District Judge Jane Boyle handed down a life sentence, along with a $250,000 fine and $6,500 in restitution for her husband's funeral costs. Judge Boyle is reported to have described Jennifer's conduct at sentencing as pure evil. Then, U.S. Attorney Chad Meacham and ATF Special Agent in Charge Jeffrey Boschek II also issued public statements marking the case's resolution. No appeal from Jennifer Faith has been located in the record. Notable because having pleaded guilty rather than gone to trial, she would be unusual in pursuing one at all. That GoFundMe campaign, the one that eventually raised more than $60,000 from people who wanted to help a grieving widow, became something else in Jennifer Faith's hand. She withdrew roughly $58,000 of it over 2 months and used the money to buy things for Darren Lopez, including airline tickets for him and his daughters and a large screen television. Meanwhile, her husband's own $6,500 funeral bill went unpaid. After the misuse became public, GoFundMe issued full refunds to the donors. While the federal case against Jennifer Faith was working its way towards a guilty plea, a separate and entirely contested case was building against the man who actually pulled the trigger. Darren Lopez was charged with murder in Dallas County, Texas, a state charge tried in a state courtroom, and unlike Jennifer's case, it went to a full jury trial. Lopez didn't deny that he shot Jamie Faith. His defense was built around something Texas law calls defense of a third person, a legal argument that a person can be justified in using force, even deadly force, if they reasonably believed it was necessary to protect someone else from an imminent threat. Lopez's argument was that he believed, based on what Jennifer Faith had told him, that Jamie was abusing her, including, according to that trial evidence, a claimed belief that Jamie intended to gang rape her that day. That is a serious allegation, attributed to Lopez's own accounts of his state of mind rather than to any independent proof, and it was contested at trial, not established as fact. Prosecutors, led by Assistant District Attorneys Brandy Mitchell and Caitlin Paver, argued that Lopez had acted on a story that was fabricated from the start, using fake accounts, doctored images, and stock photos, and that whatever he believed, it wasn't reasonable, and it didn't justify what he'd done. Jurors were shown surveillance video from that morning of the murder footage capturing the Faiths leaving their house and then the shooting itself. On July 28, 2023, the jury deliberated roughly an hour and 15 minutes before returning a unanimous guilty verdict on the murder charge, rejecting the defense of a third person argument. Then, unanimously, they set his sentence at 62 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, roughly halfway through the statutory range for murder, which runs from 5 years up to life. With that sentence, Lopez would become eligible for parole after approximately 31 years. Lopez's defense attorney, Juan Carlos Sanchez, told reporters he was disappointed in the verdict. In the North Oak Cliff neighborhood where the Faiths lived, the case left a lasting mark on people who had nothing to do with it beyond proximity. A neighbor, Melissa Gonzalez, and an attorney interviewed about the case, Christy Jack, both spoke publicly about its impact in the aftermath. And Amber, Jennifer's daughter, identified in reporting as Jamie's stepdaughter or adopted daughter, relocated from Texas following the case. One of the quieter, harder to measure costs left behind by what happened on that October morning. What's confirmed, and what isn't going anywhere, is this. An American Airlines IT director named Jamie Faith was shot to death on a morning walk with his dog by a man his wife had spent 7 months persuading to do it, using a threat that was never real. A GoFundMe meant to support his grieving family was drained to fund gifts for the man who killed him before donors got their money back. And 2 separate courts in 2 separate systems have now agreed on at least this much, that what happened to Jamie Faith on that October morning was murder, and that the story his killer believed he was acting on was a lie. What the record can settle is the question underneath all of that. 2 courts have already ruled that Darren Lopez's belief that Jennifer was in danger, that force was justified, wasn't reasonable enough to excuse what he did. That's a legal conclusion and it stands, but it isn't the same thing as knowing what actually Lopez believed in the seconds before he pulled the trigger. A jury can decide whether a belief was reasonable. It can't fully see inside the other person's head. That gap between what a court can rule on and what a person actually believed is where this case ultimately leaves its hardest and least answerable question. And that's where we leave this case. Jennifer Faith created the lie. Darren Lopez believed it. And Jamie Faith paid for it with his life. The court have answered the legal questions. Jennifer pleaded guilty and will spend the rest of her life in federal prison. Lopez was convicted of murder, sentenced to 62 years, and an appeals court upheld that conviction. But there's one question a verdict can only take us so far in answering. When Darren Lopez pulled that trigger, what did he actually believe? The jury decided that whatever he believed wasn't reasonable enough to justify killing Jamie. Legally, that question is settled. What none of us can know is how completely 7 months of manipulation had changed the reality Lopez thought he was acting in. And that doesn't excuse what he did, but it may help explain how a lie told by one person eventually became a murder committed by another. Some questions have answers, others may never get them. But here, we'll always try to separate what we know from what we think we know. I'm Aaron. Thanks for watching. If there's a case you think deserves this kind of examination, let us know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives like this one, subscribe. I'll see you in the next case.